to her?
I wouldn't be standing here today without you. She gave me a second chance when everyone else wanted to bury me.
Who is she really?
She is the reason I still have a future.
Security. Remove this woman immediately. The sharp voice cut through the laughter and violin music like broken glass. Every conversation around the Hampton estate slowed. Crystal glasses paused halfway to smiling lips. Heads turned. And standing near the marble fountain, with nothing more than a navy dress and a small leather handbag, Grace Mitchell simply blinked. Eleanor Whitaker stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone terrace. Her diamond bracelet caught the afternoon sun. "I will not have some stranger ruining my son's wedding," she snapped. "Get her out." Two security guards exchanged uncertain looks. Grace remained still, not angry, not frightened, just quiet. "Ma'am," she said softly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Eleanor laughed, not kindly. The kind of laugh people use when they believe they are untouchable. A misunderstanding? She moved closer, lowering her voice. "This estate is worth over $30 million. These guests come from families that have been somebody for generations." Her eyes moved over Grace's modest clothes. "You don't belong here." Several guests smiled awkwardly. Others pretended not to listen. Nobody stepped in. Nobody asked who Grace was. That was how things worked in places like Southampton. People often judged before they understood. Grace lowered her eyes politely. "I apologize if I've caused concern." "The audacity," Eleanor muttered. She snapped her fingers towards security. "Escort her out before she embarrasses herself." Across the lawn, waiters carrying champagne trays suddenly stopped moving. The catering manager froze. His eyes widened. He looked from Grace to Eleanor. His face turned pale, but he said nothing, not yet. The string quartet continued playing. Guests resumed talking. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. Probably another woman looking for attention. Maybe someone trying to sneak into a wealthy wedding. Grace heard every word. And still, she said nothing. Because life had taught her something long ago. People reveal themselves when they believe you have nothing to offer. Eleanor had spent years believing power came from money. Grace had spent years learning that real power usually arrived quietly. The ocean breeze drifted across the gardens. White roses swayed gently. Beyond the fountain stood the main house. 4 stories of old generations of history. Or at least, that was what the Whitakers believed. Grace glanced toward the eastern path. Her eyes lingered on the old oak tree near the carriage house. Something softened inside her. Memories, summer evenings. Her father's laugh, her grandfather teaching her how to ride a bicycle beneath those branches. Gone, all gone. Or so everyone thought. "Ma'am." One of the guards approached carefully. His voice wasn't harsh. "We need you to leave." Grace smiled gently. Of course, no argument, no scene. That confused Eleanor even more. "Good," she announced loudly, making sure nearby guests heard. "Some people simply don't understand boundaries." Several women nodded approvingly. A man in a gray suit muttered, "Should have called the police." Another guest laughed, probably looking for handouts. Grace heard that too. She simply thanked the guard. Then she turned. But instead of heading directly toward the gate, she walked slowly toward the garden path. Not like a stranger, not like someone lost. She walked like someone who had walked there 1,000 times before. And that was when Samuel Reed dropped his gardening shears. The old groundskeeper froze. His weathered hands trembled. His eyes filled with disbelief. "Oh, Lord," he whispered under his breath. No, the shears hit the grass. And for the first time in over 20 years, Samuel Reed saw a face he thought he would never see again. "Miss Grace?" His voice barely escaped his lips. And suddenly, the old man looked terrified. Samuel Reed stood behind the rose hedge with both hands hanging at his sides, as if his body had forgotten what to do. Grace turned toward him. For one small second, the noise of the wedding disappeared. The violins faded. The glasses stopped ringing. Even Eleanor's sharp voice seemed far away. "Hello, Samuel," Grace said. The old man covered his mouth. His eyes shone wet in the afternoon light. "You came back," he whispered. Grace gave him a small, careful smile. "I said I would someday." Samuel looked toward the terrace, toward Eleanor, toward the guests who were watching with polite disgust and private curiosity. His face changed. Fear moved through it like a shadow across water. "Miss Grace, you should not be here alone." Eleanor heard that. Her head snapped around. "Miss Grace?" She marched across the lawn, her cream dress flashing between white chairs and flower arrangements. Her smile was gone now. What replaced it was harder, colder. "Samuel," she said, "do you know this woman?" Samuel swallowed, his cap twisted in his hands. "I knew her family, Mom." Eleanor stopped close enough to make him step back. "Knew her family?" He looked at Grace. Then down at the grass. "A long time ago." Eleanor laughed under her breath, but there was a crack in it now. "Well, that explains nothing. Lots of people used to know lots of people. It does not give them the right to wander through my son's wedding." Grace said nothing. She simply looked past Eleanor toward the old oak tree near the carriage house, its lower branch still bent toward the ground. The bark was darker where storms had scarred it. Beneath that branch, Grace remembered a small girl with scraped knees and a father who smelled like cedar soap, lifting her onto his shoulders so she could see the bay. She had not allowed herself to think about that place in years. Not like this, not with strangers laughing over it. Eleanor followed her gaze. "What are you staring at?" Grace answered softly. "That tree used to have a swing." The words were simple, but Samuel flinched. The catering manager, standing near the champagne table, turned pale again. A housekeeper at the rear entrance pressed a hand to her chest. Eleanor saw all of it. Her eyes narrowed. "What is wrong with everyone today?" No one answered. The wedding planner, a thin woman named Allison Parks, hurried over with a clipboard clutched to her ribs. "Mrs. Whitaker," she said carefully, "the ceremony schedule is already tight. The photographer needs the family near the South Garden in 10 minutes. Not now, Allison. But Mom, the guests are beginning to notice." "They can notice," Eleanor snapped. "I am handling a security issue." Allison looked at Grace, not with contempt, with worry. That made Eleanor angrier. Grace began walking again. She did not rush. She moved along the garden path, past the roses, past the fountain, past the stone bench beneath the maple trees. Each step was measured, certain, the kind of certainty that does not come from reading a map. She avoided a loose flagstone without glancing down. The younger security guard noticed. So did Samuel. So did Eleanor. Grace reached the reflecting pool and stopped. The water was still, broken only by a few fallen petals drifting across the surface. At the far end stood a fountain of carved limestone, weathered by salt air and time. Grace's fingers tightened around her handbag. Her grandfather had installed that fountain after the war, not because he wanted to show wealth, because he wanted peace. Running water, he used to say, reminded a house to breathe. The brass nameplate was gone now, but Grace knew where it had been. She could still see the 4 small holes in the stone. Samuel stepped closer, voice trembling. "Your father used to sit right there." Grace nodded. "I know." Eleanor's face flushed. "That is enough." Her voice carried across the lawn. Guests turned again. She pointed at Grace like a judge handing down sentence. "I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but you are making my staff uncomfortable and disrupting a private event." Grace looked at her then, fully, calmly, and Eleanor felt it. Not fear, something worse. A quiet confidence that did not bend. "I understand," Grace said, but she did not apologize this time. That silence landed harder than any insult. Eleanor turned to the guards. "Escort her out now, and make sure she does not come back through those gates." The younger guard hesitated. Samuel took one step forward. "Mrs. Whitaker, please." Eleanor spun on him. "Back to work." Samuel froze. Grace saw the old man's shoulders fold inward. She saw the shame in his eyes. She saw 20 years of silence sitting on his back, and for the first time her expression changed. Only slightly, but enough. Pain passed through her face, then it was gone. She looked at Samuel gently. "It's all right." The guards moved beside her. The guests watched from behind, champagne glasses and pearl necklaces. Grace turned toward the main gate, and as she walked, every person who had ever made a living inside that house watched her go with the same thought rising in their throats. The past had just walked back onto the property, and it had not come empty-handed. Grace walked between the two guards without lowering her head. The younger one stayed half a step behind, careful not to touch her arm. His name was Marcus Lee. He had been working private security for only 8 months, long enough to understand that rich people often mistook service for obedience. He looked at Grace's face and felt something pull in his chest. She was not acting like a trespasser. She was acting like a woman leaving a room she had already measured. Behind them, Eleanor followed at a distance, making sure everyone saw her victory. "Ladies and gentlemen," she called, lifting her voice over the lawn, "please forgive the interruption. Some people simply do not understand that private property means private." A few guests laughed, not loudly, just enough to belong to the winning side. Constance Avery, a widow with silver hair and emerald earrings, leaned toward her friend and whispered, "How does a person even get past the gate?" Her friend, Margaret Bell, did not lower her voice. "People like that always find a way in." Grace heard it. Marcus heard it too. His jaw tightened, but he kept walking. At the garden gate, Grace stopped and turned back. For the first time, she looked not at Eleanor, but at the crowd. Slowly, carefully. Her eyes moved from face to face. The man who had laughed, the woman who had looked away, the photographer lowering his camera like he had been caught holding evidence, the bridesmaid pretending to adjust flowers because shame had made her hands restless. Grace saw it all. Eleanor stiffened. "What are you doing?" Grace's voice stayed calm. "Remembering." That single word made the air feel colder. Eleanor stepped closer. "Remembering what?" "Who speaks when cruelty is easy," Grace said, "and who stays silent." A hush fell across the nearest tables. No one knew what to do with that. It was too quiet to be a threat, too precise to be harmless. Eleanor's face flushed pink beneath her makeup. "Do not try to make yourself noble. You wandered into a family wedding and made a scene." Grace tilted her head slightly. "I did not raise my voice." "No," Eleanor snapped. "You just stood there, making everyone uncomfortable." Grace looked toward Samuel near the rose hedge. The old man still held his cap in both hands. His shoulders shook. He wanted to speak. He wanted to say what he knew, but fear had lived in that house longer than the Whitakers. Grace understood fear like that. It was passed down in quiet instructions. "Keep your head down. Do not make trouble. Survive today. Try again tomorrow." She had spent half her life studying the damage those instructions left behind. "Mrs. Whitaker," Marcus said quietly, "we should just take her through the gate." Eleanor cut her eyes toward him. "You should do exactly what you are paid to do." Marcus swallowed. "Yes, Mom." Grace turned toward him. "It's all right." Her kindness embarrassed him more than anger would have. He opened the iron gate. The hinges groaned. Grace stepped through onto the sidewalk outside the estate. The road was lined with black cars, polished SUVs, and hired drivers waiting with engines idling low. Across the street, a dark sedan sat beneath a maple tree. Grace walked to it. Eleanor watched, arms folded. "She'll leave now," Margaret said, beside her. Eleanor smiled thinly. She had better. But Grace did not get into the car. She opened the trunk. Marcus saw the leather briefcase first. Old, dark brown, worn at the corners. Not expensive in a fashionable way. Expensive in the way old things become when they have survived important rooms. Grace lifted it with both hands. The movement was careful, deliberate. Eleanor's smile faded. "What is she doing?" Grace closed the trunk, and she turned back toward the gate. Marcus took one step back. "Mom," he said, voice low, "what's in the case?" Grace looked at him with a small, unreadable smile. Records. The word settled into him. Records. Not dog gifts. Not a camera. Records. Inside the lawn, the guests had started talking again, but softer now. The kind of talking that happens when people know the story is not finished. Eleanor walked quickly toward the gate. "No, absolutely not." Grace approached calmly. Marcus stood between them for one breath, unsure who he was supposed to protect. Eleanor pointed at Grace. "You are not coming back in." Grace looked through the gate at the house rising behind the roses. The windows caught the afternoon sun. For a moment, the glass looked like fire. "I am not here for your wedding," Grace said. Eleanor gave a sharp laugh. Then what are you here for? Grace's hand tightened around the briefcase handle. Not from fear, from memory, from 20 years of locked doors, from a father who died believing he had lost his home, from a name scraped off a fountain and covered with another family's pride. She stepped closer to the gate. Her voice was quiet, clear. I came back for what was taken. Marcus stopped breathing. Samuel, across the lawn, closed his eyes. And Eleanor Whitaker, for the first time that afternoon, had no quick answer. Eleanor stared at Grace through the iron gate as if the bars themselves had betrayed her. What was taken? She repeated. The words came out sharp but not steady. Grace did not answer right away. She looked past Eleanor, past the white roses, past the reception tables dressed in linen and silver. Her eyes settled on the front steps of the main house. Her house. At least, that was the truth hidden beneath layers of paper, signatures, old lies, and rich people's confidence. Eleanor recovered first. Security, she said. She is threatening me now. Marcus glanced at the other guard, a broad man named Paul, who had worked enough estate parties to know one rule. The person with the checkbook usually won. Paul stepped forward. Mom, you need to leave the entrance clear. Grace nodded once. I will not block the entrance. Then she walked through the open gate. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Eleanor moved in front of her. You are not invited. Grace looked at her. No, I am not. That answer threw Eleanor off balance. Around them, guests began to drift closer, not all at once, in small movements. A man pretending to check his phone, a woman lifting her champagne glass and taking no sip, two bridesmaids whispering near the rose arch. People wanted distance from trouble, but they wanted to watch it more. Grace crossed the lawn toward an empty table at the far edge of the reception. The table had been meant for late arrivals. Place cards sat untouched beside folded napkins. She set the leather briefcase on the table. The sound was soft, but somehow everyone heard it. Click, she opened the latches. Eleanor's eyes dropped to the case. Inside were folders, neat, labeled, color-coded. The kind of order that did not belong to a desperate woman. The kind of order that made powerful people nervous. What is that? Eleanor asked. Grace removed a cream-colored folder. Documents. Fake ones, I'm sure. Grace opened the folder and took out a legal pad. She wrote the time at the top of the page. Eleanor saw it. What are you writing? Grace did not look up. A record. A record of what? Grace's pen moved slowly, events as they occur. A murmur moved through the crowd. Constance Avery stepped closer, her emerald earrings flashing. Eleanor, darling, should someone call the police? Eleanor lifted her chin. I am considering it. Grace finally looked up. You are welcome to. That quiet sentence did more damage than a shout. Eleanor's mouth tightened. She turned toward a passing server, a young woman carrying water glasses. Do not serve her. The server stopped so quickly the water trembled on the tray. Mom? You heard me. Nobody serves this woman. Nobody speaks to her. She is not a guest. The server looked at Grace. Grace gave her a faint smile. It's all right, but the young woman's eyes filled with shame. She had rent due Monday. A child at home. A mother who needed prescriptions. She could not afford courage in a room full of money. She backed away. Yes, Mom. Eleanor watched her go, satisfied. Grace wrote that down, too. Across the terrace, Samuel stood beneath the oak tree, his cap pressed to his chest. Beside him, Allison Parks whispered, Who is she really? Samuel's lips trembled. The one they were told never to mention. Allison turned toward him. What does that mean? Samuel shook his head. It means this place has been living on borrowed time. At Grace's table, 3 younger guests approached. Madison Clark led them, tall and blonde in a pink designer dress, the kind bought for photographs more than comfort. She smiled at Grace with bright, practiced cruelty. Excuse me, Madison said. This is a private wedding. Grace looked up. Yes, I understand. Madison crossed her arms. Then why are you still here? Because leaving is not appropriate yet. One of Madison's friends laughed. Appropriate? Who talks like that? Grace closed one folder and opened another. Madison leaned closer. Listen, lady. Whatever you think you are proving, you are making people uncomfortable. Grace's eyes lifted. Discomfort is not always harm. Madison blinked. Grace continued. Sometimes discomfort is what people feel when a mirror is finally held still. The laughter stopped. Madison's face hardened. You think you are better than us? No, Grace said. I think every person here is showing exactly who they are. That landed hard. Madison stepped back, wounded because the words were calm enough to be true. Eleanor saw the shift and rushed in. Enough of this performance. She pointed toward the gate again. Leave now, or I will have you arrested for trespassing. Grace looked at the house, then at Eleanor, then at the legal papers spread before her. For the first time, she smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, knowingly. Trespassing, she said softly. The word hung there. Samuel closed his eyes. Marcus felt the hairs rise on his arms. And Eleanor, still certain she owned the ground beneath her feet, did not realize the ground was about to move. Eleanor did not like the way Grace said that word. Trespassing. It was too slow, too clean, too certain. So Eleanor did what people often do when certainty frightens them. She got louder. You are documenting nothing, she said. You are sitting at my table, on my lawn, during my family's private celebration, pretending to be important. Grace kept her pen still. Eleanor turned to the crowd. Do you all see this? This is what happens when you let one person push past the rules. Suddenly they think the whole world owes them a seat. A few guests nodded. They needed Eleanor to be right. Because if she was wrong, then their silence had already become part of something ugly. Harrison Bell, a retired banker with a red face and a glass of bourbon in his hand, stepped forward. My wife is right, he said, though Eleanor was not his wife, and everyone knew it. Security should have removed her the first time. Madison folded her arms. She is trying to scare everyone with paperwork. Grace looked at the circle forming around her table. Not one person had asked her name. Not one person had asked why Samuel nearly cried when he saw her. They had decided the story before hearing the facts. That was the oldest kind of injustice. The kind that wore pearls. The kind that spoke softly in boardrooms. The kind that signed papers and called it order. Grace closed her folder. The small sound made several guests look down. Mrs. Whitaker, she said, may I ask you a simple question? Eleanor laughed once. You may not. Grace asked anyway. When your family moved into this estate, who handled the closing? Eleanor's face tightened. What? The purchase? The deed transfer? Title insurance? County recording? Who handled it? Harrison Bell frowned. That is none of your business. Grace nodded. That is one possible answer. Eleanor leaned toward her. We bought this property legally. Then it should be easy to prove. The sentence moved through the guests like a cold draft. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. You think I am going to produce personal family documents for some stranger at a wedding? No, Grace said. I think eventually someone else will ask for them. The words were calm, but something in them changed the air. Paul, the older guard, shifted his weight. He had heard enough legal threats in his career to recognize one that was not bluffing. Allison Parks clutched her clipboard tighter. The photographer, a quiet man named Ben Riley, raised his camera without thinking. The lens caught Grace seated at the white linen table, Eleanor standing over her, guests circled like witnesses who did not yet know they were witnesses. Eleanor turned sharply. Do not photograph her. Ben lowered the camera. Yes, Mom, delete it. He looked at the screen. His thumb hovered. He did not press the button. Grace saw that. So did Marcus. Eleanor did not. From the edge of the lawn, Samuel stepped forward again. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, voice shaking. Maybe you should let her speak. Eleanor's head snapped toward him. Samuel, I warned you. He flinched, but this time he did not step back. Something had changed in the old man. Maybe it was shame. Maybe it was relief. Maybe seeing Grace alive and steady had returned a piece of him he thought had died with her father. I worked here before your family came, he said. The crowd quieted. Eleanor stared at him. You worked here because we kept you employed. Samuel shook his head slowly. No, Mom. The words were barely louder than breath, but they landed. Eleanor went still. Samuel looked at Grace, then at the house. I stayed because I was asked to keep watch. The silence that followed was different, thicker. More dangerous. Madison whispered, Keep watch for who? Samuel's mouth trembled. Grace's eyes softened. You do not have to do this, she said. Yes, Miss Grace, Samuel whispered. I do. Eleanor stepped toward him. If you say one more word, you are finished here. Samuel looked at her with tired eyes. I have been finished here for a long time, Mom. I just kept coming to work. That hurt more than anger. It made the staff near the kitchen doorway lower their eyes. They knew that feeling. To survive in a house where people looked through you, to be needed and dismissed at the same time. Eleanor's voice dropped. "Get off my lawn!" Grace stood, slowly. The chair legs whispered against the grass. "That is enough." Not loud, not emotional, but every person heard it. Even the quartet stopped playing. Grace looked at Eleanor with a calm that had been built through courts, funerals, and years of waiting for the right moment. "You may insult me if you need to," she said. "You may misunderstand me, but you will not threaten him again." Eleanor blinked. No one spoke to her that way. Not in her home, not in front of her guests. Then, from behind the crowd, a man's voice cut through the silence. "What exactly is going on here?" Detective Aaron Hayes stepped onto the lawn, dark suit, wedding invitation tucked inside his jacket pocket. He saw Eleanor first, then Samuel, then Grace. His face changed. All color left it. He stopped walking. "Oh my God," he whispered. Grace turned toward him. "Hello, Detective Hayes." Aaron swallowed hard, and in front of every guest at that wedding, he bowed his head with unmistakable respect. Aaron Hayes did not bow deeply. It was not theatrical. It was just a slight dip of the head. But to people who understood power, it was louder than a siren. Eleanor saw it. So did every guest standing near the table. Detective Aaron Hayes was not a timid man. He had served 22 years in law enforcement. He had testified in murder trials. He had arrested men twice his size. His reputation in Suffolk County was calm, careful, and hard to shake. And now he was looking at Grace Mitchell like she outranked everyone on that lawn. Eleanor's voice sharpened. "Aaron, you know this woman?" Aaron did not answer her right away. His eyes stayed on Grace. "Mom," he said, softer than anyone had heard him speak all afternoon. "I had no idea you would be here." Grace closed the folder in front of her. "I did not announce myself." "No, Mom," he said. "I can see that." The crowd shifted. "Mom, not Miss, not Lady, Mom." Respect had entered the garden, and it changed the temperature. Eleanor forced a laugh. "Well, since you apparently know her, perhaps you can explain why she refuses to leave my property." Aaron turned slowly toward Eleanor. His face was careful now. That was what worried Grace. Aaron knew how to wear authority without showing panic, but his eyes gave him away. He had already understood the shape of the disaster. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "I think everyone should take a breath. I do not need a breath. I need you to remove a trespasser." Aaron looked at Grace, then at the briefcase, then back at Eleanor. "I cannot do that." A ripple moved through the crowd. Eleanor blinked. "What did you say?" "I said I cannot do that. You are a detective." "Yes, Mom. Then do your job." Aaron's jaw tightened. "I am trying to." Harrison Bell stepped beside Eleanor, his bourbon now forgotten. "Detective, this is absurd. She has been asked to leave a private estate. That is trespassing. It seems fairly simple." Aaron looked at him. "No, sir, it does not." Madison folded her arms. "Why not?" Aaron paused. He understood the line he was standing on. One wrong word, and this wedding would become evidence. Maybe it already had. Grace watched him make the choice. He turned to Eleanor. "Do you have proof that this property belongs to your family?" The question dropped into the garden like a stone into still water. No one moved. Eleanor stared. "Excuse me?" "Proof of ownership," Aaron said. "A deed, a title report, closing documents, anything like that." Eleanor's face hardened. "How dare you ask me that in front of my guests?" "I am asking because you are demanding that I remove someone for trespassing. Before I do that, I need to be sure who has lawful authority over the property." The word lawful cut through the flowers and champagne. Paul, the older guard, looked toward Marcus. Marcus looked at the ground. Eleanor spoke slowly, as if teaching a child. "The Whitaker family has lived here for more than 20 years. That is not what I asked." The crowd inhaled. Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Aaron, I have known your mother since church bake sales. Do not stand on my lawn and embarrass me." Aaron's expression changed. "Only a little, but enough. My mother also taught me not to put a person in handcuffs because someone wealthy felt uncomfortable." Silence, heavy, sharp. Grace looked down at her legal pad. She did not smile, but something in her shoulders eased. That sentence mattered. Not because it solved anything, Because someone had finally spoken like every person on the lawn had equal weight under the law. Eleanor's hands trembled once before she clasped them together. This woman is manipulating you. Aaron pulled out his phone. Then let's clear it up. What are you doing? Checking county property records. That is completely unnecessary. It is public information. His thumb moved across the screen. The guests pressed closer, no longer pretending not to listen. Even the string quartet had lowered their instruments. Aaron spoke as he typed. Address? Allison Parks answered before Eleanor could stop her. 47 Meadowbrook Lane. Eleanor snapped Allison. The planner lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. Aaron continued. Southampton. Grace sat still. Samuel stared at the ground, breathing hard. Aaron waited as the page loaded. The wireless signal was weak near the old stone house. A small spinning circle turned on his screen. No one spoke. Not Eleanor. Not Harrison. Not Madison. Even the fountain seemed louder. Then the page opened. Aaron's face changed. The change was small, but everyone saw it. His eyebrows lifted. His mouth tightened. He looked at Grace. Grace gave him the faintest nod. Permission. Aaron swallowed. According to county records, he said, this estate was originally recorded under the Mitchell Family Trust. Eleanor laughed, but it came out dry. Originally. That could mean 100 years ago. Aaron kept reading. Transferred from William Mitchell to Robert Mitchell, then from Robert Mitchell to his surviving daughter. He stopped. The garden went still. Eleanor whispered no. Aaron looked up. To Grace Elaine Mitchell. The name hung in the air. Grace did not move. Eleanor did. She stepped back once, as if the lawn beneath her had tilted. Aaron looked at the phone again. And the current listed owner is the Grace Mitchell Trust. The champagne glasses stopped clinking. The whispers died. And for the first time since Grace had walked through the gate, every person at that wedding understood one terrible possibility. They may have been calling the owner a trespasser. Eleanor stared at Aaron's phone like the screen had insulted her personally. That is wrong, she said. No one answered. That is obviously wrong. Aaron kept the phone in his hand, but he did not raise his voice. That made it worse. A calm officer is harder to dismiss than an angry one. County records can contain errors, he said. But this is the Public Ownership Index. Harrison Bell cleared his throat. Well, public records are not perfect. Anyone who has dealt with county offices knows that. Grace opened another folder. They are not perfect, she said. That is why I brought certified copies. Eleanor's eyes snapped to the table. Grace removed a thick packet of documents, clipped cleanly at the corner. The paper was heavy. The seals were raised. Not photocopies printed in a rush. Not internet forms. Official papers. Aaron stepped closer. May I? Grace handed them to him. Eleanor moved quickly. No, do not give him anything. This is a setup. Aaron looked at her. Mrs. Whitaker, please. Do not please me. That woman walked in here with a briefcase full of theater. Grace's voice stayed quiet. The original deed was recorded under my grandfather, William Mitchell, in 1925. The property passed to my father, Robert Mitchell, in 1978. After his death, the estate transferred to me through the Mitchell Family Trust. She said it the way some people recite prayer, not because it was memorized, because it had been carried too long. Samuel wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. My daddy worked for Mr. William, he said. I was a boy when Mr. Robert took over. Eleanor turned on him. You will stop talking. Samuel shook his head. No, Mom, not anymore. The staff near the kitchen doorway went still. A server pressed her tray against her waist as if holding herself together. Grace continued. The property taxes have been paid every year by the trust. Maintenance fees, groundskeeping, insurance riders, environmental assessments for the protected wetlands near the south edge. Aaron reviewed the documents. His expression grew heavier with each page. These appear legitimate, he said. Appear? Eleanor snapped. Appear is not proof. Grace reached into the briefcase again. Then here is more. She placed another folder on the table. Bank records, tax receipts, trust correspondence, letters from an estate management company that had quietly handled the property for 2 decades, while the Whitakers enjoyed a house they never truly owned. Eleanor's breathing changed. Short. Thin. Private panic made public. Margaret Bell leaned close to her. "Eleanor," she whispered, "where is your deed?" Eleanor did not look at her. "Our attorney has it." "Then call him." "I will." But her fingers did not move toward her phone. Aaron noticed. So did Grace. So did everyone close enough to see her hands shaking. Harrison tried to recover the room. "This is ridiculous. Families do not live in a house for 20 years without owning it." Grace looked at him. "Yes, they do." Her voice was soft. "That is exactly how many families lose homes in this country. Through confusion, pressure, bad paperwork, greed dressed up as law." No one spoke. Grace's words had moved beyond the wedding, beyond the lawn. They landed somewhere older. In every foreclosure that happened too fast. Every widow who signed what she did not understand. Every family that trusted people who spoke with polished voices and carried expensive pens. Eleanor swallowed. "We paid for this place." Grace looked at her carefully. "To whom?" Eleanor's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Aaron lowered the documents. "Mrs. Whitaker, do you have any record of a sale?" "It was handled years ago." "By whom?" "Our family office." "Which attorney?" Eleanor's eyes flicked toward the driveway. For the first time, she looked like a woman waiting for rescue. Grace saw it and felt no pleasure. That surprised her. She had imagined this moment many times. In her mind, it had been clean, strong, just. But standing here now, watching Eleanor's pride crack open, Grace felt the old grief more than victory. Her father should have been here. He should have heard the truth spoken out loud. Instead, he died with a lie sitting on his chest. Samuel stepped toward the table. "Miss Grace," he said, voice broken, "your father never stopped asking about this place." Grace closed her eyes, only for 1 second. When she opened them, they were wet but steady. "I know," Eleanor seized on the softness. "There, see. This is emotional. This is personal. She is not here with facts. She is here for revenge." Grace turned to her. "No," the word was quiet. "Final. I am here for accountability. The difference mattered. Revenge only needs pain. Accountability needs truth." Aaron's phone buzzed. He looked down, then back at Grace. "I can call the county clerk's office and verify the certified record." Grace nodded. "Please do." Eleanor stepped back. "No." Everyone turned. Her face had gone pale beneath the makeup. "I said no." Aaron looked at her. "Why not?" The question was simple, too simple. Eleanor's lips parted. The whole lawn waited. Then from the driveway came the sound of tires on gravel. A black sedan pulled up fast near the main entrance. The door opened. A silver-haired man in a dark suit stepped out with a leather briefcase in his hand. Eleanor's face flooded with relief. "Richard," she called. "Thank God." Richard Coleman, her family attorney, hurried across the lawn. Then he saw Grace. His steps stopped. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the grass. All the color drained from his face. "Judge Mitchell," he whispered. Richard Coleman stood frozen in the grass, one hand still hanging in the air where his briefcase had been. The entire wedding seemed to lean toward him. Eleanor hurried across the lawn, relief rushing ahead of her. "Richard, tell them this is nonsense. Tell them she is lying." Richard did not look at Eleanor. He looked only at Grace. His lips moved once before sound came out. "Your Honor." That was all it took. The words moved through the guests like lightning through a dry field. "Your Honor." Madison's mouth opened. Harrison Bell lowered his bourbon. Constance Avery pressed a hand against her pearls. Eleanor stopped beside Richard and stared at him. "What did you call her?" Richard swallowed. Sweat had already gathered near his temple. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "we should speak privately." "No," she said. "You will speak right here. You will tell this woman to leave my property." Richard closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, he looked older, much older. "This is not your property." The sentence landed with a sound no one could hear, but everyone felt. Eleanor stepped back. "You do not know that." Richard's voice dropped. "I know enough." Grace rose from the table. She did not move toward him. She did not need to. The space had already rearranged around her. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "you represented the Whitaker family office during the estate restructuring in 2004, did you not?" Richard's throat tightened. "I handled many matters that year. That was not my question." Aaron Hayes looked from Grace to Richard. His training sharpened. His eyes changed from guest to investigator. Richard bent and picked up his briefcase with trembling fingers. I would need to review old files. Grace opened the black folder inside her briefcase. This one was different. Not cream paper. Not estate records. Black leather. Federal seal. Aaron saw it and took one step back. "Oh," he whispered. Eleanor caught it. "What? What is that?" Grace did not answer her. She removed one sheet and placed it on the table. Letters sent to my father claimed the estate had been sold to satisfy debts. Those debts did not exist. The sale was never recorded. Yet your clients occupied the property, changed locks, removed Mitchell family markers, and presented themselves as owners for more than 2 decades. Richard's face had gone gray. "That is a serious allegation." "Yes," Grace said, "it is." Eleanor shook her head hard. No, this is insane." Richard stopped standing there like a coward. He flinched. That made several guests look away. They were used to watching Eleanor cut down staff. They were not used to seeing a lawyer bleed from it. Grace's voice softened, but not with mercy yet. "My father died believing he had lost this home through his own failure. He spent his final years ashamed of a debt that never existed." The garden went quiet. Even Eleanor did not interrupt. For the first time, Grace's pain had entered the room without asking permission. Samuel covered his face. "I am sorry, Miss Grace," he whispered. Grace looked at him. "You are not the one who took it." Richard shifted. "Your Honor, if there was misconduct, it may not have involved my client directly." Eleanor snapped toward him. "My client? Are you defending her now?" "I am trying to keep you from making this worse." "Worse than what?" Richard looked at the documents on the table. Potential fraud, false filings, possible tax exposure, maybe conspiracy depending on who knew what and when. The words were dry, legal. But they hit Eleanor like stones. Tax exposure, fraud, conspiracy. The wedding guests backed away in small, shameful steps. Not because they had found compassion, because the danger now had a name. Harrison Bell whispered, "This cannot be happening." Madison's face had lost its color. Grace turned to Aaron. "Detective Hayes, I am not asking for arrests today." Eleanor laughed suddenly. A brittle, frightened sound. "How generous." Grace looked at her. "I am asking for the truth to be preserved." Aaron nodded. "I understand, Ben Riley." The photographer lifted his camera slightly. Eleanor saw him. "Do not you dare." Ben's hands shook. But he did not lower the camera this time. "I think," he said, voice cracking, "I should keep the images." Eleanor stared at him as if a chair had spoken. Grace looked at Ben. "Thank you." 2 words, that was all. But Ben stood taller. Sometimes dignity spreads that way, quietly, one person at a time. Richard leaned close to Eleanor. "We need to leave now. This is my son's wedding. It is also a legal disaster." Grace closed the black folder. The sound was soft, final. Eleanor looked at the seal on the cover. Her eyes narrowed. "What kind of judge are you?" Aaron answered before Grace could. "Federal." The words struck the lawn silent. Federal. Not county. Not local. Not someone Eleanor could pressure with dinner invitations and charity boards. Richard's shoulders sank. Aaron continued, voice low. "United States District Court." Eleanor stared at Grace. Grace met her eyes without anger. That was the part Eleanor could not understand. Grace had the power to crush her. And she was still standing there calmly, asking only for truth. Then, from the far side of the terrace, a man in a tuxedo pushed through the stunned crowd. The groom, Daniel Whitaker. His new bride held his hand, confused and frightened. "Mom," Daniel said, "what is going on?" He saw Grace. He stopped. His face went white. "Judge Mitchell," he whispered. Daniel Whitaker looked as if someone had reached into his chest and stopped his heart with one hand. His bride, Emily, tightened her fingers around his. "Daniel," she whispered. "You know her?" He did not answer. He could not. For a moment, all he saw was a courtroom in Brooklyn, cold wood, high ceiling, federal flag. His own hands shaking on the defense table while prosecutors described wire transfers, shell accounts, and a future that was about to disappear. Then he saw Grace Mitchell on the bench. Calm, measured, not cruel, never cruel. She had looked at him like he was a human being before she looked at him like a defendant. That was what broke him then. It was what broke him now. Eleanor grabbed his arm. "Daniel, tell them this woman has no right to be here." Daniel slowly pulled his arm away. The gesture was small, but Eleanor felt it like a slap. "Mom," he said, voice dry, "stop talking." The crowd inhaled. Eleanor stared at him. What did you say? Daniel looked at Grace again. Your Honor, he said. I had no idea. Grace gave him a formal nod. Mr. Whitaker. Emily turned from Daniel to Grace, confusion turning into fear. Your Honor? Daniel swallowed. 3 years ago, I stood in Judge Mitchell's courtroom. Eleanor's eyes widened. No. Daniel's voice cracked, but he kept going. I was charged in a federal money laundering case. A sharp gasp moved through the guests. Madison pressed both hands over her mouth. Harrison Bell muttered, Good God. Emily's hand slipped from Daniel's. He turned to her quickly. I told you about the investigation, he said. I told you I made mistakes before we met. Emily's eyes filled, not with anger yet, but with the hurt of realizing a story had been smaller than the truth. You did not tell me it was federal court. Daniel lowered his head. I was ashamed. Grace watched him carefully. That word mattered. Shame can make a person lie, but it can also make a person change. Daniel stepped away from his mother and faced the crowd. His tuxedo looked suddenly too formal for the truth he was about to carry. I was guilty, he said. Eleanor made a sound like a breath being cut in half. Daniel, do not do this. He turned toward her. You did enough today, Mom. Her face collapsed for half a second before pride pulled it tight again. Daniel looked back at the guests. I helped move money I knew was suspicious. I told myself I was young. I told myself everyone in finance bends rules. I told myself it was paperwork, not people. His voice dropped. But there are always people at the end of dishonest money. Families, workers, businesses that get buried while men like me call it strategy. Aaron Hayes looked down. Richard Coleman closed his eyes. The lesson was no longer abstract. It had a face. Daniel pointed gently toward Grace. She could have sent me to prison for years. The guidelines gave her room to do it. My lawyer told me to prepare for the worst. Grace said nothing. Her silence gave Daniel space to tell the truth without rescue. But Judge Mitchell asked questions no one else asked. Who had I harmed? What had I learned? Was I willing to make restitution? Was punishment enough? Or could accountability actually change something? His eyes were wet now. She sentenced me to community service, financial ethics monitoring, restitution, and probation. She made me report to a nonprofit that helped families recover from foreclosure fraud. I served meals. I cleaned offices. I sat with people who lost homes because someone with a nicer suit signed something they never understood. He looked toward the mansion. Maybe that is why this is killing me, Eleanor whispered Daniel, but he did not stop. She saved my life. The words came out raw, not polished, not rehearsed. She gave me a chance to become the kind of man who could stand here today and tell the truth, even when it humiliates my family. Emily looked at him through tears. You should have told me. I know, he said, and I am sorry. Those words were not for the crowd. They were for his wife. Grace saw Emily's face soften, not in forgiveness yet, but in recognition. Truth hurts, but it also opens a door that secrets keep locked. Daniel turned back to Grace. Your Honor, I owe you more than I can ever repay. Grace's expression remained composed, but her eyes carried the weight of memory. You owe me nothing, Mr. Whitaker. You owe the truth to the people around you. Daniel nodded slowly. Then he walked to the small microphone near the ceremony arch. Eleanor's body stiffened. No, she said. Daniel picked it up. The speaker cracked once. Every guest turned. Every server stopped. Every whisper died. Daniel looked at Grace, then at his mother, then at the house behind them. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice shaking but clear. This wedding cannot continue as if nothing happened. Daniel's voice rolled across the lawn, thin at first, then stronger. My mother was wrong. Eleanor closed her eyes. 3 words. They struck harder than any accusation. Daniel looked at Grace, then at the staff standing near the kitchen doors. She was wrong about Judge Mitchell. She was wrong about this house. And she was wrong about the people who keep this place alive. No one moved. The wedding had become something else now. Not a celebration. A reckoning. Emily stood beside Daniel, pale but steady. Her hand found his again, not to excuse him, but to help him stand inside the truth he had chosen. Grace walked slowly toward the microphone. The crowd parted without being asked. That was the first honest respect she had received all day. Daniel offered her the microphone with both hands. Your Honor, he said. Grace accepted it. For a moment, she did not speak. The ocean wind moved through the roses. A napkin slid from a table and brushed across the grass. Somewhere near the fountain, Samuel was crying quietly. Grace looked at the house, then at Eleanor, then at the guests who had laughed when she was called a trespasser. "I came here today," Grace said, "because this property belonged to my family." Her voice was calm, clear, no performance. "My grandfather planted those oaks. My father repaired that fountain with his own hands. My mother chose the roses near the east wall because she believed every home should have something beautiful growing beside it." Eleanor's face twisted, but she said nothing. Grace continued. "More than 20 years ago, my father received documents claiming this estate had been sold to cover debts. He believed them. He died believing he had failed his family." She paused. The silence deepened. Those documents were false. Richard Coleman lowered his head. Aaron Hayes stood beside him, already making notes. Grace looked toward the federal folder on the table. "There will be a formal review. The records will go to the proper authorities. If crimes were committed, they will be handled through the law, not through gossip, not through revenge, and not through private influence." That sentence carried the full weight of who she was. A federal judge, a woman with power, a woman who knew exactly when not to abuse it. Eleanor finally spoke, her voice broken. "What happens to us?" Grace looked at her for a long moment. The crowd waited for punishment. They wanted it now. Some because they felt guilty. Some because they were frightened. Some because people often enjoy justice most when it falls on someone else. But Grace was not there to satisfy them. "That depends," she said. "On what?" Eleanor whispered. "On whether you can tell the truth when it no longer protects you." Eleanor's lips trembled. Grace turned toward Samuel. "Mr. Reed worked here with loyalty for decades. He will not be threatened again. His employment records, wages, and pension contributions will be reviewed and corrected if necessary." Samuel pressed his cap to his chest. "Miss Grace, I never wanted money." "I know," she said gently. "That is why you deserve fairness." Then Grace looked at the staff. The same applies to every person employed on this property. A server began to cry. The catering manager covered his mouth. For years, they had been invisible in a house that depended on them. Now someone had said their dignity out loud. Grace faced Eleanor again. "You will issue a written apology to the staff and to every guest who witnessed what happened today. You will cooperate with the property review. You will not destroy records. You will not pressure witnesses, and until ownership is resolved formally, all future decisions about this estate will go through council and the trust." Richard nodded quickly. "Understood, Your Honor." Eleanor looked smaller now. Not poor, not powerless. Just stripped of the illusion that money made her morally taller. "I am sorry," she whispered. Grace did not rush to accept it. "Say it to them." Eleanor turned toward Samuel first. The old man looked frightened by the attention. "I am sorry," she said, voice shaking, "for how I spoke to you, for how I treated you." Samuel's eyes filled again. He nodded once, not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of something less heavy. Eleanor faced the staff. "I am sorry." The words were raw, imperfect, late, but real enough to break the silence. Grace handed the microphone back to Daniel. Then she closed her briefcase. The click sounded final. Aaron stepped beside her. "Your Honor, do you want an escort?" Grace looked at the garden one last time. "No, detective. I know the way out." She walked past the fountain, past the oak tree, past the roses her mother had loved. This time, no one called security. No one laughed. No one told her she did not belong. At the gate, Marcus opened it and stood straight. "Mom," he said softly. Grace paused. "Thank you, Marcus." He blinked, surprised she knew his name. Then she stepped onto the sidewalk and walked toward her car, carrying not just a briefcase, but a family name that had finally been spoken with honor again. Behind her, the wedding remained silent. Not ruined, changed, and sometimes that is what justice looks like. Not a storm, not revenge, just truth standing calmly where shame used to live. If you were in Grace's place, with the power to destroy people who humiliated you, would you choose punishment first? Or would you give them one chance to change? Think about that. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who still believes dignity should never depend on wealth, race, or status.